One, 63 days to Election Day. Whether or not we're in the home stretch or we're just out of the gates, where do we stand in Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump? 2, we should listen because it's being said out loud. Arrest Elon Musk. Assault free speech. Suspend the Constitution. A conversation with Professor Gad Saad. 3, a weekend with my people talking college football in one of the most mysterious frontiers in America. It is the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com, on the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page, terrestrial radio, coast to coast, market to market, and always on demand by simply hitting subscribe at Apple or Spotify, or hit subscribe on YouTube. Jump into the comments section on Facebook, where last week we did over 500,000 on one particular episode, or jump into the comments section on YouTube and become part of the Willisha. While you're there, hit subscribe, and we'll bring you into the Will Cain Show. Speaking of the Willisha, what's up, boys in New York? Two-a-days, young establishment. James, did you guys have a good Labor Day? Did you guys have a good long weekend? It's one of the first long weekends I've had in forever.
It was nice. Got time to do some stuff, wedding planning, which is fun. But also got to a lake, which is nice.
It's coming. Wedding day.
Dude.
It's coming. Doomsday. It's not doomsday. Actually, that's what I was doing this weekend, 2 days. I was at a wedding.
Oh, nice.
And actually, I hope you will stick around, not just to keep our show on air and running technologically and contributing on air. I hope you'll stick around because I have a few thoughts about weddings. And one of the big, what I think, you know how I get captivated by frontiers. One of the mysterious frontiers of America. I'm going to tell you about that coming up a little bit later here in the Will Cain Show. But big weekend of college football. Our boy Tinfoil Pat absent today from the Will Cain Show.
Yikes.
Is that because
maybe
the world's biggest Florida State fan is now 0-2?
Oof, man, that was rough.
They look bad.
I felt bad for him last night. I was thinking about him, but, could be why he's out.
He's ride or die. He is hardcore. I like somebody that's hardcore about something random. That's random in my life. More passionate about anything else in the world, the Florida State Seminoles. He didn't call in sick. This was a pre-planned week off for Tinfoil Pat. But it's going to be well-timed because he would have gotten it today here from the Willisha. Ugly start for Florida State. Good-looking start for the rest of, I guess, I don't know about everybody here on the Will Cain Show, but good-looking start for me. By the way, I had a big football weekend. I had the weekend off from Fox and Friends, which meant on Friday night, I got to do Friday Night Lights, baby. Ooh. I got small town.
Wow.
Or maybe not small town, but small school Texas football. I got to see the Sun kick 1 extra point, 2 kickoffs, and about half a dozen punts. If you can do the math on what I just told you, good game or bad game for young Mr. Cain?
Ooh, bad?
2 extra points, 1 extra point, 2 kickoffs, half a dozen punts.
Bad.
They scored 15 points?
They scored 7 points. You kick off once to start one of the halves, and you kick off after a touchdown.
Not a strong suit.
They lost 42. They lost 42-7. So our resident onside kick specialist, we've talked about that, I think, here. My son has developed a unique talent. I like to joke it's like being good at Russian roulette because the chance, the element of chance is very high in an onside kick. But for some weird reason, he keeps coming up aces. And he did in his first game of the season, which was in Ireland. No onside kicks here. There's no point in onside kicking when you're down 42-7. But I got to do a little football. We'll review that as well in story number 3 today. But we got a big show. You want to stick around because one of the deepest thinkers we ever invite into the show, Gad Saad, Professor Gad Saad, author of The Parasitic Mind, is going to be with us. He's got a new book he's working on. He's written a paper called Suicidal Empathy. I find this absolutely fascinating. And we're going to apply suicidal empathy to this trend we're watching where there's an open call for the suspension of free speech. There's an open call in the pages of the New York Times for the suspension of the United States Constitution. We're going to get all that in just a moment. But 63 days until the election. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know if that means we're just out of the gates. We're in the fourth quarter. We're down the home stretch. But we need to take a state of the race. Story number one. It is often said that the race doesn't begin until after Labor Day. Over the summer in a presidential election, you ride several highs. One could call them sugar highs with your party convention. First, the Republican convention, which, of course, was on the tail end of an attempted assassination. Let's just repeat that for a moment. An attempted assassination of Donald Trump that has, poof, disappeared, not just from the news cycle, but from the public mindset. Obviously, in the wake of that and the Republican National Convention, Donald Trump was riding high. Then we saw Joe Biden exit the race for president. Kamala Harris still somewhat riding high from the Democratic National Convention. And here's where we stand today. If people say the race doesn't begin until after Labor Day, then we are out of the gates. If it feels like this has been going on forever, then maybe we're down the home stretch. Either way, this is the Real Clear polling state of play as of today. The Real Clear Politics poll average shows Donald Trump 46.3, Kamala Harris 48.1, a 1.8 favorable polling average according to RCP for Kamala Harris. We can put this stuff up on the screen. Top battleground states, it's much tighter. Trump 47.5, Harris 47.8. Favorability ratings, Trump negative 9.4, Harris negative 1.1. A swing of 8.3 in favorability for Kamala Harris. And then interestingly, the Real Clear Politics betting odds just recently moved, but they moved in favor of Donald Trump. 49.7 to 48.8 for Donald Trump in the Real Clear Politics betting odds. Now, Nate Silver, 538 pollster, he sees a different state of play. He looks at the Electoral College map, and currently he has it as 55% odds of winning for Donald Trump, 44.6% odds for Kamala Harris. Now, however much stock we put in various polls or the past track records of Nate Silver or Real Clear Politics, that is the best we can ascertain today, again, as we open the gates. The most interesting number for me, the number that I want to talk about today is favorability, the one that shows an 8.8% advantage for Kamala Harris. Because favorability is, unfortunately, I think, the surface of the river, a river which has a lot of rapids, a lot of boulders, a turbulent river, but a river that most people float along the surface, as we've talked about. If there's any real goal here on the Will Cain Show, besides to hear a bunch of idiots have a good time, talk college football, and try to dig into deep ideas, it is to encourage us to stick the rudder down into the stream, to fly our sail. In other words, to be the captain of our own ship, to understand the issues, what's beneath the surface, what winds are pushing us in a certain direction, not just ride along the surface, for example, of favorability. But that doesn't prevent us from trying to, take the temperature of the patient, understand realities, see the world around us. And unfortunately, and I mean that, unfortunately for most of the world, they ride along the surface. So you have to look at the water. Like a fly fisherman, you got to be able to read the river. And the river is, I think, as follows. Jessica Tarlov, Democratic strategist, often appearing on Fox News, said something I think very accurate last week on the Will Cain Show. She said that for the past decade, American politics has been defined by Donald Trump. And that's true, meaning most people have been animated, enthused, motivated to vote based upon their favorability of Donald Trump. They love him, they hate him. And that's about the depth of their analysis when it comes to voting for president. I don't mean to insult the American public, because I think there's a lot of big issues like the economy that motivate voters. But if it's truly the issues, like if that's the big, big thing, well, then Trump would be winning in a landslide, because we show that the economy is overwhelmingly the number one issue and overwhelmingly trends towards Trump. So why? Why is the betting odds tight, if not favoring Trump? Why are the polling averages favoring Kamala Harris? Because people ride along the surface of their feelings about Donald Trump, and they have for 10 years. Now, Kamala Harris knows this, and her team knows this, and that's why they're running a campaign on vibes, but also on a protective bubble. Very little exposure to Kamala Harris. The question is, can she pull it off for 63 days? You see, she right now is blah. I don't mean that as an insult. I mean that as a campaign strategy. She's a placeholder. She's a vote for other. Joe Biden he was in 2020, a vote for other, and he became in 2024 an unacceptable vote for other. Democrats figured out if we just swap in a sentient, breathing, all cylinders firing presidential candidate, it will return to the state of play for the past decade. People riding the surface and voting how they feel about Donald Trump. And that's what Kamala Harris remains. She remains that placeholder, that other, that blah, that blank slate, that referendum on Donald Trump. Now, can she pull it off to Election Day? Well, to me, that comes down to a couple of different factors. First, number one, who exactly is Kamala Harris? What does she believe? She's been a public office holder for quite some time. Hell, she's the vice president of the United States. She was a United States senator. She has voted. Who is she? It shouldn't be a mystery, and it can't or should not be something that's defined in 2 months when you have a track record. And the answer to who Kamala Harris is that she was the furthest voting senator to the left, even more so than Bernie Sanders. That comes as a surprise to most people. I'm telling you still, there are people that do not know this about Kamala Harris. Now, Donald Trump's going to call her Comrade Harris. People like me are going to talk about her open embrace of Marxism, which she has. We've played the clip of her talking about equity. It means, in her words, direct quote, equal outcomes, that we should be pursuing equal outcomes. That's an open embrace of Marxism, but that's not breaking through to the person riding along the surface. And that's in part because she has a complicit media that's going to play the game of keeping her in a protective bubble for 3 months and only 2 months to go. Let's revisit the first sit-down interview last week. I haven't gotten to speak to you since Kamala Harris and Tim Walz sat down with CNN's Dana Bash. Not much came out of that interview. It wasn't a big needle mover, but that's a win for Kamala Harris. I don't think she has to win America. She has to remain blah. She has to remain an option other than Donald Trump. And Dana Bash and CNN played their role in keeping her undefined, in asking, I think, ridiculous questions of Kamala Harris. I actually think it's worth breaking down what I'm talking about. I don't just want to cast an aspersion. I'm not going to sit here and tell you I have completely mastered the craft, but I do take pride in an interview. I do take pride in curiosity. When I joined ESPN in 2015, they used to have this. Budget cuts have meant that it's no longer part of their program. But when you joined ESPN as an on-air talent, they had a course that you took. And the man's name is escaping me for the moment, but it was a phenomenal course on interviewing. And he taught you how to ask questions. And I mean, there were lessons I learned in that interview that, in that course that I retain to this day. You learn things, it goes in one ear out the other. My memory's getting worse as I get older. Hey, speaking of getting older, guys in New York, I'm going to tell you a story real quick from this weekend. My youngest son went with me to the Friday night football game, and he was with me all weekend at the wedding, and he said to me, Dad, yeah, people are talking. And I started wondering, do you dye your hair? And I said, what do you mean, man? He goes, well, I was looking around at like all your friends and they're gray and you're not. And he asked me in sincerity, do I dye my hair? It's infiltrated the home, this suspicion.
Everyone asks. It's good genetics, man. He should be happy about it.
Look at it. I can't zoom this camera. There are grays appearing on the edges. There's zero dye. Zero dye.
Yeah, you went a long time without it.
Had to explain that to West. But one of the things I remembered as I'm aging, and I'm starting to show some cracks in the old memory, is here's the type of questions you should ask. First of all, open. So A closed question provides the interviewee the option for a yes or no answer. You don't want yes or no answers. You want the interviewee to talk. You want them to expose more about what they say. So you ask open questions. Why, how, when, what. You don't say, did you X? Easy opt-outs, yes or no. That doesn't mean you never use that tool as a question, but you want to frame them that way. Neutral questions. Don't put value propositions in the question so that you reflect what you believe. Now, when I do this, in a few minutes, we're going to have Professor Gad Saad here on the Will Cain Show. I'm going to talk to him conversationally. It's not an interview. So he'll hear my opinion, I'll hear his opinion, and we'll either build upon it or we'll debate. But when you're interviewing somebody, you don't want to poison the question with your value proposition. You want it to be neutral. And you don't want, for example, to provide them the answer in the question. Here's something Dana Bash did, okay? She said in a leading question, as you would hear in a court trial, to Kamala Harris, what was the question? It was, why did you change your position? I think it was one of the ones she was asking about, why have you changed your position on certain issues? And then she provided to give her a couple options as the answer. I wish I had that clip, or I wish I had that direct quote in front of me, but it was stark. Like, she gave her two options in the question for what Kamala Harris could pick as her answer. And of course, Kamala picks one of the options. I remember her answer, by the way, on why she switched positions. She said, my values have always remained the same. And I mean, that's not an answer. What does that mean? The follow-up is, what are your values? And then you have to dig into, well, you've said these things like about equity. That sounds Marxist. Are these your values? Are you flipping positions? Because your positions have remained the same, but you're saying your values have. Are you flipping positions to get elected? Are you flipping positions because you believe something new? But Dana Bash provided her the answer. Even worse, she asked Kamala Harris about covering up. That's one of the suggestions. On Thursday's show, I gave you 4 crucial questions that need to be asked. One of them is, what role did you have in covering up for Joe Biden and his senility? And she said, but the question was, do you regret standing by his side through that questioning of his mental capacity? And Kamala Harris spun it. I don't regret serving with Joe Biden. Like, it was a complete spin, and Dana Bash didn't follow it up. So my point is, the media participates in keeping her a blank slate through that time, not ever revealing those values and how far left she is. Second, who is Kamala Harris? Can she hold out for 2 more months? Well, she's an incumbent president, a vice president, same administration, Biden-Harris administration. I mean, the current president, by the way, has been on the beach for 17 days. He's back now. During which time, by the way, Hamas executed 6 hostages, including 1 American during that time. Just an embarrassment. No, not an embarrassment, a shame, a tragedy for America under the Biden-Harris administration. So you want I think their new slogan is a new path forward. How can it be a new path forward? How can Ben Stiller, Hollywood celebrity, say it's time for a change when this is the person who's been in office for 4 years, but only if she can stay in this bubble for 2 more months? And then finally, I was at breakfast this morning with some guys, and I said, look, even beyond how far left she is, even beyond these things, what I think animates voters, understand that they ride along the surface of the river, is this. Is she fake? Is she a phony? I think women are, by the way, going to react to the answer to this question strongly. They did with Hillary Clinton. So when she's flip-flopping, when she's a different person in different places, does she come across as a phony? I think that is so impactful. Here, I actually think this is really impactful. Have you seen this? She was in Detroit. I want you to listen to her accent in Detroit and then her accent in a few other places. She's got a lot of accents. Listen.
You better thank a union member for sick leave. You better thank a union member for paid leave. You better thank a union member for vacation time. And you all helped us win in 2020, and we're going to do it again in 2024. You know, the one thing about all of us is we like hard work. Hard work is good work. Hard work is good work. Do I see people testifying? Can I get a witness? It ain't over. With us in government, we campaign with the plan. Uppercase T, uppercase P, the plan. And then the environment is such that we're expected to defend the plan.
There you go. Atlanta, Detroit, a black accent in front of black audiences, a different accent 5 hours later when she's in Pennsylvania. We got to break them down and figure out what we can hear in each one of those accents. How many different accents does she have? But the important point is beyond the comedy of it is she phony? People already believe what they believe about Donald Trump. The big story last week on CNN was about him at Arlington National Cemetery and whether or not he had permission from the Army and whether or not there was an altercation from that with the Army. And in response, Gold Star families have said he was invited with us to Arlington National Cemetery. The Gold Star families, that's families who've lost their sons, their spouses in war, invited Donald Trump. They say they invited also Harris and Biden and didn't hear back. Harris and Biden deny there was ever that invitation. But the point is that story which ran on CNN, that's about how people feel about Donald Trump. And people already feel the way they're going to feel about Donald Trump. The question is, are they animated to go vote against Donald Trump? They couldn't with Joe Biden. They shouldn't, in my estimation, with Kamala Harris. But can she remain blah for 63 more days until Election Day? Let's break this down. Plus, the now open call to suspend the Constitution from the pages of the New York Times with Professor Gad Saad next on The Will Cain Show. The Tunnel to Towers Foundation honors fallen heroes by supporting their families. Families like that of U.S. Army Chief Warrant Officer Shane Michael Barnes. Officer Barnes enlisted in the Marine Corps in 2011, earning numerous awards, including the Distinguished Flying Cross. He cherished the camaraderie of military service, and he excelled as a supportive leader. During a 2023 deployment, Barnes perished in a training flight when his aircraft crashed into the Mediterranean Sea. He leaves behind his wife, Brandy, and their 2 children. To honor Officer Barnes' memory and service, the Tunnel to Towers Foundation provided Brandy and her children with a mortgage-free home through the Gold Star Family Home Program. This program provides mortgage-free homes to the families of fallen service members, honoring their sacrifice with a lasting tribute. Join Tunnel to Towers on its mission to provide mortgage-free homes to America's heroes and the families they leave behind by donating $11 a month to T2T.org. That's T, the number 2, T.org. Donate now. Professor Gad Saad on suicidal empathy next on The Will Cain Show.
Kudlow on Fox Business is now on the go for podcast fans. Download the Kudlow Show podcast every weekday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com. Kudlow covers the latest headlines and business trends with an emphasis on the financial impact facing households and businesses across the country. Listen to interviews with key business newsmakers. The Kudlow podcast will be available on the go after the show every weekday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com or wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Did you hear the news? Now you can. With instant updates from Fox News for Amazon Alexa. Breaking stories and top headlines, the economy, and so much more. Brought to you by Fox News, America's #1 cable news network. Plus, setup couldn't be easier because everything's ready to go in the app. Just say,
Alexa, play news from Fox.
In Fox News.
It's the latest when you need it, on demand, from Fox News and Amazon Alexa. Stay on top of the latest forecast with America's Weather Team in the palm of your hands.
Here's the latest from America's Weather Center.
It's Fox weather updates throughout your busy day, every day.
That heat's going to be out there for one more day.
Temperatures being 30 degrees above average.
Put the power of over 100 meteorologists and the worldwide resources of Fox in your hands with the Fox Weather Podcast. Precise, personal, powerful. Subscribe and listen now at foxnewspodcasts.com.
At some point, I think you have to take them at their own words. Robert Reich says we should arrest Elon Musk. Brazil outlaws Twitter. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in their past have said they do not believe in free speech. And now, in the pages of the New York Times, they ask, is the Constitution dangerous? It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com. On the Fox News YouTube channel, the Fox News Facebook page right now. Comments streaming in on Facebook, on YouTube. Jump in to the Will Cain Show. Hit subscribe at Apple, Spotify, or on YouTube. He is the author of the Parasitic Mind. He is Professor Gad Saad. He's a friend here of the Will Cain Show, and these are some of our deepest conversations. And I love having him here. What's up, Professor?
Hey, how you doing? So good to be with you.
It's good to be with you. You know, you often are very active on X. You're also what I would say is one of the people who are in the influencer circle of Elon Musk. What do you think now that people are, in America, calling for the arrest of Elon Musk? That's Robert Reich. I believe he was labor secretary under Clinton. And we're watching Brazil basically outlaw X.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Look, I've talked about the distinction between deontological and consequentialist ethics. So let me break it down for you because it will be relevant to your question. Deontological ethics are absolute statements. So for example, if I say it is never okay to lie, that would be a deontological statement. If I say it's okay to lie to spare someone's feelings, then that would be a consequentialist statement. Now, for many things, we're all consequentialists, and that makes perfect sense. But when it comes to foundational values that define the West, those things have to be deontological. So you can't say, I believe in freedom of speech, but not for Elon Musk or Donald Trump. I believe in presumption of innocence, but not for Brett Kavanaugh. I believe in journalistic integrity, but not when it came to Hunter Biden's laptop. Once you apply a consequentialist ethic to a deontological position, you get the kinds of problems that we're seeing today.
So the interesting thing in part about what you had to say is we are all consequentialists to some point. And if we're all being honest and we look in the mirror, it is difficult to be principled. Meaning we all can give voice to principles, but living according to principle is very difficult. That's the challenge of life, to be a moral person. When you hear, and I'm going to read two of these. Abigail Schreier has this up in the Free Press. They've revisited this. Now, these are quotes from this is going to be 2020, I believe, for Kamala Harris, where she openly advocated for shutting down X. And she did it on multiple occasions. I think it was 2 or 3 different occasions. I think once from a debate stage, once with CNN's Jake Tapper. She openly called for shutting down X. And in Tim Walz's famous statement, now his is from 2022, was that free speech does not cover misinformation and disinformation. When you hear something like that from the two people running for president and vice president, the question, I think, is, what do they believe and what would they do, right? So are they consequentialists? I guess everybody is. Like, they don't believe in a principle against free speech. They just want to apply it when it's in their favor and not apply it when it's in their disfavor. So I guess the question would be, what would it...
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I got you.
Sorry to
interrupt you.
That's right. They're being consequentialists. So what would they be in an administration when it comes to free speech?
Well, look, I am Jewish. I grew up in very difficult circumstances in the Middle East. We faced execution. My parents were kidnapped by Fatah. So, we've seen it all in terms of actual victimhood. And yet I support the right of Holocaust deniers to spew the worst of offensive and insulting speeches, right? What could be more offensive and what could be more misinformation than to deny a historically documented event whereby 6 million people were, extinguished on an industrial scale level? But in a free society, you have to tolerate imbeciles, racists, falsehood spreaders, and so on. So that's how you walk the walk and talk the talk, right? If I, a Jewish person with my personal history, am willing to tolerate Holocaust deniers, then Tim Walz and Kamala Harris don't have much of a ethical position to stand on. But again, the reason why they do that is because they must find some consequentialist calculus to explain why they need to shut you down, right? Don't say that COVID is lab leak because that's misinformation. Don't say whatever, that the Hunter Biden laptop was real because then that would allow Donald Trump to ascend for a second term. One person's truth is another person's misinformation. So for example, can men menstruate or only women menstruate? Which is the disinformation position, right? So again, there is no such thing as forbidden knowledge in science, precisely because as long as you adhere to the scientific method, all bets are off. You pursue truth unencumbered by a consequentialist ethos. So I think what these two are doing is exactly what Orwell warned us against. Maybe it's even worse than what Orwell thought.
Well, if anybody questioned his intellect, I've been walking around the world saying menstruate, and he just taught us very clearly it's menstruate, that there's a U in there. It's not menstruate. Just a hick from Texas. Also, we have this information, like the whole thing, like what would they do? Well, they've done it. Like they did it in the Biden administration. We know what they did to suppress free speech. It wasn't just calls to arrest Elon Musk or whatever it may be. And one of the big leaders, I was just trying to look this up, so I had this name while I was talking to you. His name is Rob Flaherty. Rob Flaherty was one of the people who was integral to the whole disinformation campaign in the Biden administration, punishing, identifying, limiting free speech. Rob Flaherty. He's one of the guys, for example, officials, I'm reading from Abigail Schreier in the Free Press, who reportedly pressured Facebook into censorship with the then director of Biden's digital strategy, Rob Flaherty. And who is Rob Flaherty now? Well, he is the deputy campaign manager for Kamala Harris. It's not as though this was a moment in time with COVID, a moment in time with 2020 election skepticism. This is someone who has benefited, been promoted in a leadership position for the person now running for president, Kamala Harris.
Right. I mean, we know what Kamala Harris thinks about the espousing of positions that are unpopular according to her calculus, right? You saw the clip that's been going around recently where she said, you can't allow people to just spew whatever they want without any controls or oversight. I mean, uttering those words should be enough to disqualify you as president of the United States. But yet again, because we now are so inundated with this consequentialist ethos, people don't even bat an eye. I mean, what could be more dangerous than to say things like, there has to be oversight over what people say. There has to be equality in the outcomes. As you said in your wonderful monologue, that's exactly what Marxism is. By the way, let me give you a great quote, which I don't think I've ever mentioned to you in our previous conversations. E.O. Wilson, the famous evolutionary biologist from Harvard who recently passed away, he studied social ants. Now, in social ant species, there's only one reproductive queen, and then all of the other ants are exactly equal, whether they are worker ants or soldier ants, right? So ant society is communistic. So when he was asked, Professor Wilson, what do you think about socialism, communism? His answer was, great idea, wrong species. Human beings are not communistic in their innate human nature. Some of us are taller, shorter, harder working, less hardworking. So to impose an end result of equality of outcomes on human beings is to literally be anti-human nature. So not only is it called Marxism, it defies evolutionary principles. It's very dangerous, and I hope that my neighbors to the south make the right decision on November 5th.
Talking to Professor Gad Saad here. By the way, the author of The Parasitic Mind, you got a new book I believe that you're working on, right?
I am working on a book called Suicidal Empathy. And if I can just mention, because I want to promote my latest affiliation, I just accepted a visiting professorship and global ambassadorship in your country at Northwood University, the free enterprise university. So I'm very excited to be spending a year there.
Oh yeah, awesome, cool. Well, and you also did a paper. You've already done one paper on suicidal empathy. It's up for your subscribers. I saw on your X. Now I'm fascinated by this idea of suicidal empathy, and I was looking at some of the things you've had to say about it. All I really know so far is those two words juxtaposed against each other: empathy and suicide. However, something I don't know who can claim they've discovered any idea for themselves, but like one of the pieces of wisdom I feel like I've acquired with some age, Professor, is that I've learned through children and through myself, your greatest strength is your greatest weakness. In that trait, whatever that trait may be that makes you special, is also that trait that is your downfall. And so it's like management of that trait is your life's mission. So when I was thinking about suicidal empathy, Ray Dalio, a big thinker, he tweeted this out, something similar. He said, like, attributes, people have individual attributes. Whether or not they are a strength or a weakness depends upon their application. And obviously, application is circumstantial. And I just started thinking about that when it comes to you and the idea of empathy. Empathy is treated as a virtue, but modern society has made it abundantly clear how empathy can be a vice.
Yes. So let me explain this in a couple of ways, but thank you for the lead up. Just a small correction on my subscriber exclusive content. I shared a paper by someone else on empathy, not my own. It was part of the research I'm doing for my book on suicidal empathy. But thank you for that plug. So in the Sad Truth about happiness, my last book, my happiness book, I talk about the inverted U being the most universal law of nature. Inverted U basically means too little of something is not good, too much of something is not good. It's exactly what Aristotle called the golden mean, right? He argued, look, if you are a cowardly soldier, that's not good. If you are incredibly reckless in your risk-taking, you're going to die and you're going to be a useless martyr. That's not good. Everything happens in the sweet spot, everything in moderation, as the ancient Greeks said, right? So that exactly applies to your point about personality traits. Perfectionism, for example, if you're not in the least bit perfectionist, your work will suffer because you won't have attention to detail. You won't be conscientious. If you're too perfectionist, as I am, you'll end up checking your galley proofs 45,000 times. God forbid there might be one comma out of place, and that's counterproductive. What if there is a comma out of place? You could have spent your time doing something else. Again, it's in the sweet spot. So now let's come to empathy. Empathy is noble as a virtue because we're a social species. Therefore, we have to have theory of mind. We have to put ourselves in the mind of another. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of another. And therefore, our emotional system has evolved because it confers upon us certain evolutionary advantages. But it has to be invoked within certain functional ranges, right? So take, for example, OCD, and I'll come back to empathy in a second. OCD is the misfiring of an otherwise adaptive process. And let me explain what I mean by that. It is perfectly adaptive for us to scan the world for environmental threats. I check the back door to make sure that it's locked, but I only check it once. I wash my hands when I come home once to make sure that if I shook hands with anybody who had a virus, I don't get contaminated. What happens with OCD? That adaptive mechanism misfires, right? As soon as the warning flag goes up and you tend to it, it goes back up again. So I spend 8 hours washing my hands and scalding hot water, and my skin is falling off. That's germ contamination, OCD. I keep checking the back door for 4 hours, even though one time would have been enough. So now let's apply that mechanism to empathy. It doesn't make sense that you be so suicidally empathetic so that as a means of demonstrating how virtuous you are, you literally kill your society, right? So if you target your empathy to the wrong person, Guatemalans who come in illegally are more worthy of our empathy than our own American vets. The homeless people who are defecating and fornicating in the children's parks are more valuable than the children who should be able to play in those parks void of that stimulus, right? And so what the book is about is what starts off as a noble emotion becomes quite dysfunctional when it's dysregulated. So that's the purpose. That's the point of the book.
But is that real empathy? Because like when I see that, I totally agree with, the moderate mean or whatever is too much of any one thing is bad. Moderation is the key. But I also question whether or not that's real empathy. So you talked about it in terms of like you're projecting virtue. But if it's about you and your image or even your self-image, and that's the reason you're adopting a position, and by the way, that's usually the extent of the commitment, adopting a position. It rarely is accompanied by action, although some people are empathetic and employ that in their life. But if it's about you adopting a position and you are doing it as part of your self-projection, is that even really empathy?
Yeah, that's a great question. So in my first book ever, this one, an academic book, The Evolutionary Basis of Consumption, I talk about altruism and why altruism has evolved. And I argue that the Jewish philosopher Maimonides, nearly 1,000 years ago, talked about 8 levels of altruistic piety. The highest level, to your point, is when the altruist and the beneficiary of the altruistic act don't know one another, because then they can't reap the social rewards of having committed that altruistic act. So you're exactly right that even when we call something supposedly empathetic, oftentimes it's faux empathy that is only serving as virtue signaling currency. But nonetheless, if you ask those people, why are you holding those positions? They'll say, because all refugees are welcome, because no human is illegal. So we can debate as to whether they truly are feeling that empathy or whether it is faux empathy to gain social currency. But the reality is that it is a dysfunctional application of empathy, right? There is no logical reason why you should allow entry into your host society of millions of people who don't share a single one of your foundational values, right? So, for example, in Germany and in Denmark and in Sweden and in France and in Britain, certainly now in Canada, it's coming for you in the US, you have people that are coming from countries where there is orgiastic Jew hatred, where, for example, in Pew survey research, 95 to 99% of the surveyed people from those societies have endemic Jew hatred as part of their self-identity. So then it's not going to be surprising that you have rampant anti-Semitism on campuses. Demography is destiny, and people shake their heads. Why do we have increased Jew hatred? Well, import those values, and there are downstream effects.
Right. One more philosophical question before I kind of go back to the application to maybe current events or politics. So, you talked about the hierarchy of altruism, the different levels of altruism. It kind of made me think, does it matter though? Like if you do something good and you claim reward for it, you claim some social credibility for doing something good versus the guy who remains totally anonymous. And we do kind of internally know we all give a little more respect to the person that we don't even know, the presumption of anonymity out there. But does it matter if they're both effectuating a good, like they're doing something like, and let's use Donald Trump, because I think Donald Trump's a great example. Like if Donald Trump does something good, he's probably going to tell you about it, versus the guy who remains anonymous. Does it matter if the outcome's the same?
Yeah. So again, that's a great question. I talk about this again in my first book ever, The Evolutionary Basis of Consumption. I talk about philanthropy as a costly signal, meaning that when we engage in philanthropic acts, we typically engage in these acts because we want to have then advertise it's the Will Cain Oncology Center. It's rarely ever the XXX Anonymous Oncology Center, right? And incidentally, to your point, even when people supposedly engage in anonymous altruistic acts, believe me, their inner circles, the people who matter to them, will know that they did this act, right? So even though Will Cain may not know that I gave $100 million to cancer research, I'll be sure to tell all of my billionaire friends what a wonderful guy I am. And that's exactly why Maimonides 1,000 years ago said that it is almost impossible to reach this highest level of tzedakah, that's the Hebrew word, of this kind of such pure piety, because we're human beings, we care about our social standing, and one of the ways that I ascend the social standing is to show what a good guy I am. That's just part of human nature.
And either way, there's an oncology center. So I'm not sure.
And either way, there's an oncology center.
But I do think there's a distinction between that action and those that simply adopt a position to project virtue of empathy. Okay. You and I are having this conversation, and I know, and I think probably a lot of listeners and viewers would be able to pick up where you are, although you are unpredictable and you're not crackerjack box politics, where a lot of your leanings might be, and people certainly know where mine are. So we're having this conversation about consequentialism, and we're doing it through a lot of the positions which now have become championed positions of the left, like free speech. And we're going to come back in a minute to the Constitution. But Donald Trump is famously pragmatic, okay? Is pragmatism not a more acceptable word for consequentialism? So in other words, Donald Trump will make a deal. He'll understand, I'm not running on some hardcore pro-life position if I can't get elected. Donald Trump will make pragmatic / consequentialist decisions. So in that way, I mean, you could say, well, and I think this is where you are going to go, but on foundational values like free speech, that's
exactly
not
it.
the place to be consequential.
That's exactly it. So let's apply what you just mentioned to, say, academia, right? So some people would say we absolutely should have an ethos of forbidden knowledge. There are certain areas that you should never study because the consequences of finding out those things would be too hurtful or too dangerous, right? So don't do racial differences in IQ studies, even though you may honestly apply the scientific method, because if the results come out in a way that are difficult for the politically correct narrative, well, then some group will be marginalized. Don't study sex differences, or study sex differences as long as women are always shown to be superior on every task that's ever studied. God forbid, a million times, men are shown to be superior on some tasks. Please make sure to hide that data in your file drawer, because otherwise you're part of the patriarchy. No. Academia, the pursuit of truth, has to be unencumbered by consequentialist calculations. Because if we apply that, then we should have never studied ballistics and physics, because that led to the dropping of the atomic bomb. So we absolutely need to cancel physics, because there are simply too many nefarious consequences of understanding physics. By the way, in the parasitic mind, many of the parasitic idea pathogens that I discuss stemmed from that reflex. So, for example, social scientists have spent the last 100 years developing the disciplines of anthropology and sociology and economics without any biological underpinnings, because some really imbecilic academics thought that biology is simply too dangerous to apply to the human condition. Eugenicists used it to justify their cause. Hitler used it to justify, hey, there's a natural struggle between the races. We're the Aryans. Sorry, Jews, you lost. British social class applied social Darwinism to say, hey, we're the upper class. If you die from tuberculosis in your squalor, hey, that's just Darwinian. So let's now create a worldview where biology ceases to matter for human behavior, because at least we're being noble. Or as Plato said, the noble lie, right? No. When it comes to the truth, not a single millimeter is ever ceded.
Well, but that's not the case, right? Like what you just described, I would think we're at the apex of the moral truth. We're at the apex of all those things you just described. We are not studying those. Those are off the map. You do not learn more on those subjects. Today, we are probably at the apex of that ignorance.
Exactly. Well, ignorance. By the way, that's how I originally, I often say that writing The Parasitic Mind was really a 30-year journey. Starting from when I was in the Lebanese Civil War, but I've been a professor now this is my 31st year. When I was first trying to Darwinize the business school, what do I mean by that? Applying evolutionary biology and evolutionary psychology to study economic decision-making, consumer behavior, personnel psychology. All of my colleagues were, what the hell is this? Biology doesn't apply to human behavior. And I'm thinking, how could it not apply to human behavior? You think biology applies to every single species except one called Homo sapiens? And so that's when I first started realizing that, Houston, we have a problem, right? Even very intelligent professors with many titles before and after their names could be completely lobotomized.
And it's interesting when you describe that. That's actually a little bit of what's been discussed when it comes to artificial intelligence. Like you talked about with physics and ballistics and leading to the atomic bomb. There are people who are saying this AI thing is scary. We got to stop. We got to figure out a way for it not to continue as a field of study.
Right. There are two sides to the AI story. Some say that, the robots are going to kill us in 15 minutes once they're strong enough. Others say that's complete science fiction hype. So I'm not going to weigh in on, who's right, but it's the same reflex, right? It's basically saying don't pursue some truth because the consequences of that truth will simply be too harmful. By the way, you may or may not remember this, and if your viewers haven't watched it, they should. The movie The Name of the Rose in the mid-'80s that came out with, do you know it, Will? Do you know the movie that I'm talking about?
No.
Name of the Rose?
Never heard of it. Name of the Rose. No.
It's with Christian Slater and Sean Connery. Sean Connery plays a monk, I think a Gregorian monk, this is in the Dark Ages. All of these monks are dying from a poison and their tongues are blue. And he's wondering, how did they die from that? And it turns out, just so I can fast forward, that the head monk had placed some Aristotle books dealing with humor in a forbidden library because he didn't want the monks to read any book on humor, because humor is the work of the devil. But what they were doing, and so he had laced the bottom of the pages with a poison, so that if a monk actually went in there and read the forbidden books, then he would be poisoned and get killed. That's the reflex of forbidden knowledge. I decide what you can read, what you could think, what you can say. And that's why I quoted that book in The Parasitic Mind. And that's exactly what Kamala Harris is doing. She is the head monk.
I love that. I love that analogy. Kamala Harris is the head monk. When you say, I decide, it's always, who's I? Who is the all-seeing, all-knowing, all-powerful decider of knowledge? And yeah, Kamala Harris is putting herself in the position of the head monk. So that takes me to the final thing here. I'm not shocked. And by the way, maybe in the spirit of you should never put any information or knowledge off the table, you should consider all perspective and all types of human thought. Maybe I shouldn't criticize the New York Times for publishing this, which is it's an opinion piece. I don't know who this person is. Jennifer Szalai. I don't know who that is. Maybe she's in academia. She's a nonfiction book critic. So maybe not quite as esteemed as a professor. But the headline is, the Constitution is sacred. Is it also dangerous? And the subhead is, one of the biggest threats to America's politics might be the country's founding document. For something like, I'd say, 1,000 words, she goes on to talk about the Constitution. It's shocking for me, as somebody who did study the law, and I know you're Canadian and the Constitution is uniquely American. For me, it is a sacred document. It is accumulation of, I think, centuries of knowledge. But the whole point of the Constitution is to thwart authoritarianism. Like, it's a separation of power, it's checks and balances, it's certain rights are not subjected to democracy. Yes, democracy, meaning a protection of a minority. And she spends this whole thing Orwellingly twisting language to say, yes, it subverts democracy, but in the protection of authoritarianism. And to me, well, now we're talking about free speech or whatever, increasingly this is the end game. It's not the end game, maybe it's the final hurdle to the end game, but the suspension of the Constitution.
Indeed. Look, in The Parasitic Mind, I have a quote, which I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but I don't have it in front of me. The Reagan quote, where he basically says that every generation you have to be assiduous in defending freedom, because every generation there are new folks who are trying to kill freedom, right? And so therefore you can't assume that it's going to be the default value forevermore, that you're going to have the freedoms and liberties that you take for granted. To that point, one of the reasons why some of the staunchest defenders of the Constitution, and to your point, I'm Canadian, yet frankly, I should be granted American citizenship yesterday. The reason why immigrants are some of the staunchest defenders of the Constitution and of the Western tradition is because we've sampled from the buffet of societies out there. And we know that the American experience is a bleep in history. It's an anomaly. It's a miraculous anomaly, but that's not the default value. The default value is for head monk Kamala to tell the rest of us how to dress, when to talk, when to eat, what to put in our bodies. That's the way societies have organized themselves since time immemorial. So it breaks my heart to see someone like this woman, I don't know who she is, who has benefited from all those freedoms, where people like me came and knocked on the door and said, please let us in, they're about to kill us. And she doesn't appreciate what she's got, what she has. What a shame.
Well, one other thing I'll explore with you here that I find fascinating, I'm sort of just freelancing this thought with you, which is always dangerous, but the Constitution is absolutely a subversion of democracy. When I say subversion, that makes it seem like it's secretive. It's not. It's overt. It is a document that says these certain rights will not be subjected to a majority vote. And that's why it's a projection of minority. So 51% can't decide to set aside freedom of speech. It's not going to happen because of the United States Constitution. In a pure democracy, it is pure power. You talked about the singular head monk, but it's also like tribal power. And that's how a lot of societies work, especially in third world countries. It's like whoever is the majority power, doesn't always mean by numbers because it often means by force. They dictate the terms of society over the minority. And it makes me wonder, like, that is sort of where you're pushing this. Either A, you have the ultimate confidence that you will always be on the side of the 51%, or you believe that somehow you'll be the one in power. And in that pursuit of power ultimately is brute. It's not at a voting booth. Like, it is like, it gets violent. It always does get violent. And I just wonder with somebody like Jennifer Salai, do you think in a brute fight for power, a violent fight for power, your side will be the victor? Because I'm not so confident that the side that asked for no guns, gender fluidity, legalization of drugs is the one that wants to reduce this to a fight of brute violent power.
Well, exactly. And listen, this kind of parasitic thinking that you're describing in this Jennifer lady is exactly why you have Queers for Palestine, right? In what world does it make sense where if my most fundamental identity that I present to the world, which is I'm queer, in what world would you then place all of your chips on the place that would put you through a 100% effective gravitation-based conversion method by logging you off the building, as they do in Gaza for people who are queer, versus Tel Aviv, where you actually have one of the most queer-friendly places. I mean, short of New York, San Francisco, and actually Montreal, my home city, Tel Aviv is probably right up there in the top 5 most queer-friendly places. And yet people say, no, I'm putting all my chips with the society that would, throw me off rooftops. That's the kind of unbelievably myopic, parasitic thinking, quote thinking, that I rail against all day. But, I don't want to end this on a pessimistic note, but it seems to me that some of these folks are so impenetrable to reason. I know that in your monologue, you talked about using feelings rather than thought in choosing your president. Well, I talk about this in the Parasitic Mind, right? Most people want to deploy fast and frugal heuristics to make a decision, right? Well, my emotional system is much quicker. It's autonomic, right? I love Kamala Harris. I hate Donald Trump. Thinking is so hard, right? It's so effortful. It's so cumbersome. Best to simply use my emotional system. And I keep warning people, including my colleagues, you're trained as psychologists. Use your brain. Which policies are more in line with your values? They go, no, but she's so positive. She's joyful. She's fun. I'm going with her. We need a change. They're impenetrable to reason.
Yeah, my only hope in that monologue, talking about the people that ride along the surface, who will ultimately make that emotional decision is, at this point, it's hard to find the undecided emotional reaction to Donald Trump. I think most people's emotional reaction has been defined to Donald Trump. So it's shocking to me that wherever they are, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, I guess we have to implore them to think. I don't know how the emotions can be swayed at this point. You have to figure out how to think before 63 days expires and we have election day. I look forward to suicidal empathy.
Thank you.
Encourage everyone to check out Parasitic Mind and all his stuff. He's on X. Gadzad, he's great. Professor Gadzad. Love having you on the Will Cain Show. Thanks, Professor.
Thank you so much. Cheers.
All right, take care. Really, really smart guy. Really, really. But then forget smart. Overvalued adjective. Wise. Thoughtful. Mind. All right, coming up. College football, my people, one of the mysterious frontiers of America. Next on The Will Cain Show.
The world of business moves fast. Stay on top of it with the Fox Business Rundown. Every Monday and Friday, Fox Business reporters, anchors, and hosts will bring you beneath the stock market speculation and boardroom drama to tell you about the biggest business stories of today. Whether you're on Main Street or Wall Street, Fox Business is invested in you. Listen to the Fox Business Rundown every Monday and Friday at foxbusinesspodcasts.com, Apple, Spotify, or wherever you download your favorite podcasts.
Fox Nation presents The Godfather of Fentanyl.
It was causing the most deaths that I'd ever seen.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
A shocking new docuseries about the rise of the deadly drug.
I asked him how he made his money, and he said, making drugs.
Money makes people do desperate things.
And for the first time ever,
it only ends one of two ways. You're either dead or you're in jail.
Hear from the man responsible for it all. John Roberts hosts The Godfather of Fentanyl. The must-see docuseries is streaming now on Fox Nation. Sign up at foxnation.com today.
From the Fox News Podcasts Network. Listen to the all-new Bret Baier podcast featuring Common Ground, talking to lawmakers weekly from opposite sides of the political spectrum about the issues of the day and how Americans can find common ground in a politicized world.
That's just not happening on Capitol Hill. It takes leadership, right?
Yeah, it absolutely does.
Along with all your Bret Baier favorites like the campaign, the candidates, the all-star panel, and much more. Available now at foxnewspodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
Socialism takes away free speech and imprisonment for it, says Patty Monty on Facebook. Famous saying is you can vote your way into socialism. The only way out is through bullets. To shoot your way out of socialism. That's the historical record. It's the Will Cain Show, streaming live at foxnews.com. On the Fox News Facebook page, as you just heard, with comments like that from Patty Monty. More comments in just a minute here on the Will Cain Show. Others as well from YouTube. James Moore, for example, says on YouTube, just vote on policies, not who you like or dislike. We were much better off when Trump was in office, says James Moore on YouTube. More of your comments here in just a moment on the Will Cain Show. So in like 2 weeks, our boy Two-A-Days is going to get married. And I spent my weekend in Arkansas at a wedding. Now, I hadn't spent a lot of time in Arkansas. I've been to Arkansas. By the way, I think Arkansas is a forgotten state. And I'm not insulting you, Arkansas. I have a lot of complimentary things to say in just a moment about Arkansas. But don't you think, you got Bill Clinton, but if you take somebody from, you guys are Northeasterners. Two-A-Days, Connecticut, Young Establishment, James is New York. I would bet when you were a kid filling out the map in school, you probably struggled with Arkansas. You know?
How'd you know?
A blank map, you're like, which one is that? I think it's one of the hardest states for your area of the world to remember. What's its story? What is it all about, Arkansas? Am I right?
Yeah, the whole Midwest is was a little bit hard for me as a Connecticut person to put together.
Well, it's
I knew the
South.
chef thing. Well, the South too, but everything over there. The chef on the map. That's the only ones I really knew. Where it all lines up.
The chef?
Yeah, you don't know that?
You're talking about North Dakota, South Dakota,
exactly,
Nebraska,
all the way
Kansas,
down, yeah.
Oklahoma?
That was where I was good. Everything else, not good.
Well, the other interesting thing about Arkansas is everybody in Arkansas, and I think they're a little bit forgotten. What I'm about to mention, everybody in Arkansas is a fan of the Razorbacks. And I mean, it's it doesn't matter what school you go to, you're a fan of the Razorbacks. It's not... there's not many states like that, I feel like, where there's no professional team and it does not... if you're in Texas and you're a UT fan and you didn't go to UT in some capacity, you might be a Walmart fan. You know what I mean? Meaning you go to Walmart, you get the UT gear because it's the biggest brand in the state. But that's different. In Arkansas, I almost feel like it's more acceptable. Yeah, I went to Hardin-Simmons, but I'm a Razorback fan because that's what you are in Arkansas. And I'm like... Is Louisiana the only other state? I talked about this at the bar one night. I think everybody in Louisiana is a fan of LSU, no matter where they went to school. I don't know of many other states Minnesota, maybe? Because I can't think of a lot of competition up there. You're a Gopher fan or...
Nebraska.
Yeah.
No, I don't know. Yeah, you're right. Probably everybody in Nebraska is a fan of the Cornhuskers.
Wisconsin?
Anyway. There's got to be some competition in Wisconsin.
Right.
At least you have the Brewers and the Bucks,
true.
you know, to divide some attention. But, by the way, University of Arkansas, beautiful. Beautiful. And this is part I want to talk about, the mysterious frontier. But real quick, on the wedding, my stepdad got up, and I don't often call him my stepdad because he married my mom when I was in my 20s. You know, he's one of my very good friends in life, one of my best friends in life. He gave a speech. It was his daughter getting married. And there was a little turn of phrase in his speech after the wedding that I loved. And it was a nothing throwaway 2 words. But it just, I don't know, it stuck with me. He was naming different people that played a role in his daughter's life. And he was talking about these people, this family, you know, this family. He talked about the in-laws. And he said, you know, and the Wilsons, he named a few. And then he just said, and I've gotten to know them and their people. Huh. I just loved that. And their people. Because we all have people. You got to have people. It wasn't a dismissive, I forgot, I need to pluralize this, I can't remember everybody involved. It is, there is a community around you of people. And obviously family. And by the way, I don't think that has to be restrictive. Meaning, there are people in your life who are almost family, who have seen you from when you were this big to when you were this big. And in a wedding 2 days, you're going to see it. Like, that is such a moment. Like, you know, one of my kids said, everybody at that wedding was old. I'm like, well, yeah, but that's also because, this was back to my hair being not gray. But that's because people either watched or helped raise you up. You know what I mean? In your community, part of your people. And I love that. And I hope, you know, that you see that in a couple of weeks. Like, I hope you see your people as you get married 2 days.
Yeah, I'm excited for that.
And by the way, the growth of your people, obviously.
Yeah, I'm excited about that. The coming together of friends, family. I have a big extended family too, so it's pretty great. I have a lot of people in my life, and I have a stepdad who I'm very close with too. That my mom got married to in my 20s, so I can relate to that as well. So, yeah, it's pretty great.
Got to have people.
Yep.
All right, so I was at the bar with my people, and it was just a good weekend to remember this. Like, my people are not big city people, okay? Like, I heard that on Fox and Friends this weekend, Rachel must have called me country club again because I got some tweets about it. But it's fine. It's just very far from the truth. My people are small town people. My people are Sherman, Texas, Center, Texas. This had some small town Arkansas people, Kansas. And my people, they love college football. And boy, did we watch and talk college football on Saturday. And it's just, I love it so much. I rarely get, you're with your buddies when you watch college football, but there's something about family in college football that I love even more because you have a representative from almost everything, you know? Like, I could give, as an 80-year-old, my stepdad's dad, I was giving him a hard time of Baylor beating up on Tarleton State, you know, and how nice Texas Tech was to barely beat Abilene Christian. And it's just all weekend. That's all anybody's talking about is how their team did in week 1 of college football. And the answer for my team, and for some reason young James's team as well, I can't figure that out. But my team is, for the Texas Longhorns, really good. Really, really good. I mean, the Horns are looking, I saw this written, James. The second string Texas would be a top 25 team. Now, I know we get out over our skis, and I know we're entitled as Longhorns fans, but the backups could be a top 25 team.
Arch looked good.
Arch looked amazing. 5 for 6
Scary.
for about 100 yards.
He's got a gun. Quick release.
I mean,
rushing
eyes out of his
touchdown.
hand.
and it's like 6 or 7 receivers deep. I mean, already lost the starting running back. Gonna be okay. We're already playing with the second string running back. Go ahead, 2 days.
The best thing about Texas, I was watching a little bit too, is the star power that comes out to watch that game. You got McConaughey down there. You got Glenn Powell there from the new Twister movie. People
I didn't see that. Was Glenn Powell there?
Yeah, people love to come to those Texas games, I'll tell you what.
Man, we got Michigan this weekend, week 2.
12 p.m.
Going
Saturday.
to the big house. I feel really good, by the way. I feel confident. It's I don't like feeling confident, but I feel really confident. All right, but I got to tell you about the mysterious frontier real quick. Back to Facebook. Faye Bailey Mariner says, after the debate, all we'll see is just how incapable Kamala Harris really is. She talks in circles and still doesn't know what she stands for. Maybe Faye. I don't know. I think Trump has a difficult calculation in that debate, how aggressive to be. I think it's very difficult because you can't be too difficult with a woman opponent. There's a threshold there where it starts to turn people off, but you also have to be aggressive enough to expose her and rattle her. I think she needs to be rattled, but that's a difficult needle to thread. Cindy Lou over on YouTube says, can someone please tell me her policies? Just one. Well, if I tell you what her policy is today, it might be different tomorrow. Sasha and Savisha on YouTube says she's an actress. Eddie Avila on YouTube says the fact anyone takes her seriously is seriously frightening. And One Step Away says, it amazes me that she is ahead in the polls. How is that possible? Put a fork in America if she wins. Her policies, if enacted, will be the nail in the coffin. Finally, Master Chief on YouTube says, hey, Will, who are the 2 Heisman Trophy winners born and raised in Tyler, Texas? 2 Heisman winners born and raised in Tyler, Texas. Well, one is easy. The Tyler Rose, Earl Campbell. Who is the other Heisman Trophy winner born and raised in Tyler, Texas? You guys looked that up back in New York. I'm going to go with...
Either Baker or Kyler.
What? Don't tell me.
Your mic's on.
Did you already say it? Baker?
Wait.
He's looking
not
it up.
Baker.
He's looking it up.
No, it's not.
By the way, I have
Is it
one.
like an Oklahoma
all right,
guy?
I got an article.
Oh. Is it Billy Sims?
More recent.
Is it more recent?
All right, I got an article
not-
here. 3 football legends who can trace their roots to Tyler, Texas. The first one's Earl Campbell, and then there's 2 other very recognizable names. One is in the league, and one is on TV.
I just saw it.
One is in the league and one is on TV?
Mm-hmm.
Well, Pat Mahomes is from White House, Texas, which is outside of Tyler, and I don't know if that's who they're counting.
Yeah, that was who they were counting.
Are they counting Pat Mahomes?
But not a Heisman winner. They did count him as one of the 3.
So the other guy's the Heisman winner? The guy that's on TV?
Yeah.
Is that what you're telling me?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Who is it?
Should we just go for it or more hints?
Go for it.
Johnny Football.
No, just go for
Johnny
it.
Manziel.
Johnny Manziel.
Draft day.
Johnny Manziel's from Kerrville, Texas. He's not from Tyler.
Hold up. Well, this article is from...
and someone in the chat that gave
Won't
us that
say.
question is saying Tyler, Texas. Yeah, it says his page says Tyler, Texas. Johnny Manziel. I'm looking at it right now.
Well, he didn't go to high school there, so maybe he was
got a
born and
restaurant.
raised there before and moved before. He went to Kerrville High School. I'm pretty sure I have that right.
It says his grandparents own a restaurant there.
I texted you one more comment, by the way.
His grandparents own a restaurant?
Roots.
We got someone in the chat that's watching the show that should be not.
All right, Tinfoil Pat is on vacation. I don't know what he's doing in the comment section.
He's in the comments.
Patrick Hatton says, make sure to clip that for next week. All right, I want to tell you boys about one of the most mysterious frontiers. So I'm always attracted to frontiers. I don't know what it is. I thought about that like this weekend. Like, why am I attracted to frontiers? Is it because of where I'm from? Like, where I'm from in Texas is from what they call the Cross Timbers region. To the east of me is East Texas. To the west of me basically starts like rolling plains, ranch land. I'm kind of right there on the edge. I don't think that's why. I love going to the beach. Always have. Hawaii, California. I like standing on the beach and look out over the ocean. I find it like adventurous. Whatever is there, the frontier. But one of the frontier, when we drove to Arkansas, 5 hours, you drive through Oklahoma. And Oklahoma may not be exactly what you picture it everywhere. So eastern Oklahoma is kind of mountainous. Now, when I say mountainous, we're talking about 1,000, 1,500 feet. So not big ones, but something as you're going through there. And this area was literally the frontier for so long, meaning, all right, I drove through Fort Smith, Arkansas. Fort Smith, Arkansas used to be where the U.S. jurisdiction ended. Like, that's where the judge was. I can't remember the name of the judge. But Indian Territory was directly to the west in eastern Oklahoma. By the way, Oklahoma is 40% Indian Territory today, but nobody knows what that means. If you go to Montana, South Dakota, New Mexico, you know when you're on an Indian reservation. You don't know necessarily, except for the bingo parlors and casinos in Oklahoma, when you're on an Indian reservation. And as of 5 years ago, a Supreme Court case has basically said the same thing. Nobody knows. Like, who has jurisdiction? If you get arrested, who's in charge? Choctaw Nation or the state of Oklahoma? It's a whole big deal. It's a big deal going on. And it adds to the mystery. Like, where am I? Am I in Choctaw Nation or am I in Oklahoma? So this whole area, if you've ever seen the movie True Grit, this is what it's about. Either one, John Wayne or Jeff Bridges. It's about that judge sending U.S. Marshals out into Indian Territory, out into these mountains, out into this area to bring back outlaws back to Arkansas for hanging or trial. And so it retains this mystery to this day. It's some of the poorest areas in America. Its crime rates are pretty high. But it still feels a little frontier-y, which I love. And I would encourage you, there's a series on Paramount. It's by Tyler Sheridan, who did Yellowstone, called Lawman Bass Reeves. And Bass Reeves is a black U.S. Marshal, one of the most successful in history, who rode out from Fort Smith, Arkansas, and captured guys, brought them back. And this is this little corner between where I grew up in Arkansas, and I just find it absolutely fascinating. And here's my biggest takeaway for you. That's what I said. I think we're constipated in our thought on like how and where to vacation and get away and go. When my wife and I used to live in Texas, we're like, where should we go on our anniversary? We couldn't afford. We ended up going to Oklahoma City, what they call Bricktown. Well, there's a trail, a hiking trail in the Ouachita Mountains that you can hike for 10 days. And I never thought growing up you had that kind of wilderness and mountains and a way to be a part of the world around you that is fascinating. And I know you guys have it up there because it is truly beautiful up there in Connecticut and upstate New York. You have mountains and you have a lot to explore. And I think I was mad at myself that I hadn't done a better job of exploring and understanding where I live and where I grew up, other than let's go to a Mavericks game. Let's go to a Cowboys game. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Like, the idea of entertainment becomes constipated. Eat, watch, sports, movies. It's like the world around you is full of history and natural beauty. I don't know. I just get, every time I'm there, I end up on Wikipedia, anywhere, and I see this. I end up on Wikipedia, and before you know it, I'm knee-deep in the history of outlaws and Indians and Robbers Cave. And I know, but the point is, this area isn't necessarily special. I think it's mysterious and frontier. That area is everywhere around you. It's in eastern Tennessee. It's in Alabama. It's in Connecticut. I just think the world in America is so much more fascinating if we just get out of the constipated way we think of living and entertaining ourselves in this world. Anyway, that's my big, deep thoughts from the weekend. Find your people. Go explore the mysterious world around you. And talk college football. That's going to do it for me today. I'll be back here again tomorrow. Same time, same place. We'll see you next time.